a Roman scholar and statesman, said, "Poor is a nation that has no heroes. Poor still is a nation that has heroes and forgets them." We're here today to ensure that our Revolutionary War heroes are remembered. Jeff Myers, Secretary of the Dan River Chapter, will now give our invocation.
Thank you, Gary. Please stand as you are able for the invocation. On this occasion, Almighty God, fill us with your grace and understanding as we conduct the business of our societies. Grant us words of wisdom and direct our paths as we fulfill our roles as guardians of our national heritage. Join with us as we endeavor to honor the dreams of our founders by holding aloft the light of liberty. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Color Guard Commander, advance the colors.
Have a care. Attention. Shoulder, arms. Mark time. March. Forward. March. First, hold. Left face. Present. Arms.
All citizens of the United States will please join me in pledging allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Post colors. Arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's light?
Face.
Whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched, we're so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Color guard, right face. Part time, march. Forward. March.
Our national anthem will be sung by Miss Aaliyah Link, and you will not believe this. Can't get it. I will now turn the podium back over to our president, Gary Hawk. Thank you.
I turn the podium over to Paul Smith, President of the South Boston Halifax County Museum.
And I'd like to welcome you to the South Boston Halifax County Museum for the opening of our new exhibit of the American Revolution, the Crossing of the Dam. This exhibit was originally located at the Treasury and owned by the Halifax County Historical Society. Then about a year ago, our two organizations came together and decided to relocate the exhibit to the museum. Our mutual plan was to have the exhibit moved and completed and ready for exhibition on February 20th, 2021, to coincide with the 240th anniversary of this historical event. Well, after much planning and bringing various contractors and people skills together, battling the COVID closings and a number of other things that came about in the course of doing a project, we have completed it, and I'm happy to announce that the project is completed on time and on budget. I'd like to also thank all of our volunteers here at the museum and folks that helped us throughout this time in presenting this and preparing this project. So thank you all very much. At this time, I'd like to also recognize our museum director, Jennifer Bryant, who was responsible for the design and the execution of this particular project. And she did a terrific job. And as you can all see, it came out pretty good. Thank you, Jennifer. I'd also like to introduce the president of the Halifax County Historical Society, Ms. Barbara Bass. Barbara.
On behalf of the Halifax County Historical Society, it is delighted that we have found a new permanent home for the exhibit, and we're very grateful to the museum for having accepted it, and we look forward to it being here for many, many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. The museum's policy has been from the very beginning to serve the community, promote and preserve the rich local history, and to do this all without charging admission to the museum. This would be an impossible task if it weren't for the generosity of the town of South Boston and Halifax County. So at this time, to commemorate this event and to have our official opening, I'd like to recognize the Honorable Edward Owens, Mayor of South Boston, and the County Administrator, Scott Simpson. You gentlemen would do the honors.
One, two, three.
Hard work that's been done here, so thank you very much. And now we'll turn it back to Gary.
It is my pleasure. It is my pleasure to introduce several local government officials. First, introduce Scott Simpson, County Administration, Halifax County.
Thank you. Greetings and good morning to everybody. This is another great day in Halifax County. Again, I'm Scott Simpson, the County Administrator here in Halifax, and just love that our area is blessed with a lot of history. And today we're here to commemorate the 240th anniversary of the crossing of the dam. We're fortunate to have so many special groups in our society to help us remember our history. And with exhibits and events like this and these wonderful exhibits in our museum, I welcome you to come visit and learn about and enjoy the rich history of our community. Thank you all for your interest and being here today.
Next, I'd like to recognize Tom Robb, Town Manager of the town of South Boston.
Thank you. Appreciate that introduction. On behalf of the mayor and the town council of South Boston, we welcome you to the South Boston Halifax County Museum. in the new Crossing of the Dan exhibit. Special thanks go to the Halifax County Historical Society and the South Boston Halifax County Museum for their efforts to secure a permanent location for this fine exhibit. Both organizations are to be commended for their hard work. And a special thanks to the Crossing of the Dan Committee that has put this operation on today. Welcome to South Boston.
Now I'd like to introduce Dexter Gillum, Mayor of the town of Halifax.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Halifax Town Council and the residents of the town, I wish you a warm greeting on this chilly February day. Over the last week or so, Mother Nature here in Southside Virginia has probably offered us a taste of what General Greene and his troops endured during their race to the Dan. As the mayor of the town of Halifax, I'd like to also mention that we serve as a county seat and have for over 240 years. The town and all of its residents and business owners wish to extend our thanks and congratulations to all of you who have worked so diligently over the years to raise the recognition of this historic event that took place during the Southern campaign of our revolution. The impressive exhibits, reenactments, scholarly presentations, and marketing material make this 240th anniversary commemoration today and the portrayal of Greene's triumphant story in the face of great hardship, something that we can all truly enjoy. As part of my welcoming remarks this morning, I would also like to mention that the town, in conjunction with the Crossing of the Dan Committee and others here in our community, are working to design and install some National Park Service quality interpretive panels at the Kingsbridge Landing, Wayside, and River Overlook beside the Bannister River in the town. These panels will reference the race to the Dan and the significance of Greene's one-week resupply at what was then called Halifax Courthouse, north of the Bannister River. This display will tie in with the existing Boyd's Ferry outdoor exhibit on the Dan River. A grant has been secured from the Virginia Department of Historic Resources to repair and rehabilitate the stone piers at the wayside where this display will be installed. If I'm not mistaken, this morning, our speaker, Mr. Mike Cecere, is going to comment on the historical significance of this encampment north of the Bannister. It is our sincere hope that next year we will be in a position to have the Camp Halifax Courthouse site fully integrated into the Crossing of the Dan weekend to include a formal dedication ceremony. Again, on behalf of the town of Halifax, I would like to thank all of you for your support and attendance. And I'd once again like to welcome you to the 240th anniversary commemoration of the Crossing of the Dan.
We'll now have greetings from national and state officers. First is Jeff Thomas, President of the Virginia Sons of the American Revolution.
Good morning. As the SAR host president, it is my honor to bring greetings to all of you today on behalf of the Virginia SAR and to extend a warm welcome to all of those who have joined us for this historic commemoration. I have been attending this event for a number of years, and this is one of my favorite events every year. I have to commend the Dan River SAR and the Berryman Green DAR for all their work in putting this event together every year. I think it's a testament to what we can accomplish when we all work together, come together in the community, and work to further our shared mission. And I just love the tremendous amount of community support we get for this event every year from the county, the towns, the museums, historical society, the schools, and the public. What an amazing tribute to our Patriot ancestors and to the historic events that occurred right here in the cause of liberty. So thank you to all who have worked so hard to make this event happen. And thank you to all who are participating today.
Thank you, President Thomas. Next, Darrell S. Addington, Surgeon General, National Society of the Sons of the American Revolution.
Good morning. Greetings to you on behalf of President General Sons of the American Revolution. I want to commemorate you all in a wonderful meeting so far and a commemoration to the 240th crossing of the Dan. I look forward more to next year, maybe when we can be there in person. Thank you much.
Next, we have Frederick D. Leonard, President of the North Carolina Society of the American Revolution.
Greetings. My name is Fred Leonard. I'm president of the North Carolina Society SAR and a member of the Patriots chapter of Winston-Salem, which is about a 5 days march from South Boston. On behalf of our 1,265 members of the North Carolina Society, I welcome you to this year's 240th commemoration of the crossing of the Dan. The race to the Dan began after the Battle of Cowpens, when the British lost 100 dead and 500 were captured. The trick was to keep them getting back into Cornwallis's army. It was a 230-mile march. 200 of those miles were across the state of North Carolina to the protection of the Dan River. Can you imagine what it was like to have moved that many prisoners, knowing that the British Army were hot on your tail? I would like to thank all of you for attending today's ceremony and remind you that the war is not over. The Battle of Guilford Courthouse, God willing, is scheduled to occur at 3 p.m. Saturday, March 13th via Zoom. You can all sign in at the North Carolina SAR calendar of events. I thank you for inviting me today.
Next, I'd like to introduce Thomas Van Fossen, District Vice President, Texas Sons of the American Revolution.
Morning. I'm Tom Van Fossen, District 6 VP from Texas and President of the Dallas chapter. On behalf of the 2,769 frozen compatriots here in the great state of Texas society, we bring you greetings on the 240th anniversary of the crossing of the Dan.
Thank you. Next, C. David Carr, Trustee of the Tennessee Sons of the American Revolution.
Sir, you'll need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
I'm sorry. It's an honor to be here this morning. I bring you greetings on behalf of the Tennessee Society and our president, the Honorable Mark Norris, from our 22 chapters and 1,350 members. It's a great honor to be here and represent our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Sarah Cox, who's Vice President of Virginia Children of the American Revolution.
Good morning. Senior Virginia Society State President, Ms. Stacy Wojciechowski, and I am honored to be here today to bring greetings on behalf of the Virginia Society Children of the American Revolution. I am very proud of the fighting that took place here and the will of these American patriots to overcome these unforeseen obstacles. I pray that we never forget our brave and noble patriots that fought at the crossing of the Dan, and that we always honor their legacy and remember this American victory. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Dr. Michael E. Weiler, the Governor of the Virginia Society of the Founders and Patriots of America.
Thank you and good morning. The Virginia Society of the Order of the Founders and Patriots of America is here to bring greetings on the 240th anniversary of the crossing of the Dan by General Nathaniel Greene and his army. We are here not only to honor them, but also their ancestors, the founders of America, who first landed on this continent when it was mostly a barren waste, a wilderness. And then there was years after they arrived, they created a country where liberty was considered a cherished value. They passed that on to their descendants such that a century and a half later, their descendants took up arms in the establishment of the United States of America. It is indeed an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now turn the podium over to Robb, Regent of the Berryman Green Chapter, Virginia, Daughters of the American Revolution, who will introduce our speaker.
Thank you. Welcome, friends, near and far. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome our good friend Mike Cecere to sunny South Boston this morning via Zoom from Williamsburg, Virginia. Isn't technology wonderful that we can be celebrating today with people from all over the United States? Mike is a friend to this committee. He has been involved in the crossing of the Dan commemorations almost from the very beginning, and that is going on now 10 years. Mike is an accomplished individual. He wears many, many hats. He is a noted historian and author. He has published 16 books on the American Revolution, and most of them focus on Virginia and the role of Virginians in this wonderful cause of freedom. He also has several books that are in manuscript form and waiting to be published. I don't know when the man sleeps. He obviously doesn't, because he is a noted lecturer and a school teacher. He is the winner of the Sons of the American Revolution Outstanding Teacher of the Year Award, and he is a reenactor. I have never seen him any happier than about 5 years ago when we were able to have a river crossing, and the ferry boat brought all the troops across the Dan River, and it was snowing. And I mean, it was a miserable day. And all those men on the ferry boat just said, oh, this is a green kind of day. And they were lugging the cannons up that muddy riverbank, and they were having a wonderful time. And Mike Cecere was there leading the charge up the hill. But in his spare time, he is an interpreter in colonial Williamsburg, where he grows tobacco. And you know that our heritage in Virginia is tobacco. So he is helping to keep our history alive on so many different levels. He and his wife currently make their home in Williamsburg. And I have to say thank you to his wife, Susan, because Susan, you share him with us. And I'm sure you would like to have him home on a weekend every once in a while. But thank you, Susan. And thank you, Mike Cecere, for everything you do for our chapter here locally, the Sons of the American Revolution and the Daughters of the American Revolution. We thank you. And without further introductions, Mike Cecere.
Thank you very much, Ann. I'm not 100% sure everyone can hear me. So I'd like a little confirmation from somebody. Yeah, you can. Thank you. That was a great introduction. Oh my God. And I am really sorry I can't be there this year. The Crossing of the Dan last year was the only event we were able to do on our regular schedule. We adapted and did a couple of other kind of impromptu small events as the fall came in. But oh, we love the Crossing of the Dan, and I love working with all of you. And I'm very, very excited. This being the 240th anniversary. We hate to miss those zero numbers, don't we? And make it big. But down the road is 250th, and I'll still be around. And I'm planning. I want to see something really, really big there. And frankly, I'm excited about next year. Did the river flood this year? Does anybody in South Boston know the river flooded? Because it seems to flood a lot. Oh, you're all muted. I'm sorry, you can't talk. Well, I'll check later.
So the presentation today, actually, as I was watching the video, I was growing a little more and more concerned. I'm like, oh man, a lot of what I'm going to say is actually already covered this. And then I remembered my audience and I went, oh God, these guys know this stuff pretty well already too. But I think I still have enough information to share that will hopefully make it worthwhile. So, but forgive me if some of this is repetitive. Let me get it up now. Yes, it's a PowerPoint. Okay. And there we go. Can you see General Gates? Yes, I see Dave Carver shaking his head. Good. I only see like 3 people, actually 2 people, Stacy and Dave, 103 and 104. That's all I can see on my thing. All right. So I plucked this quote. They kept asking me, what's the title of your talk? What's the title of your talk? And I really didn't have one. And then I came across this: the fate of the war being uncertain. It's a quote from General Greene to Governor Nash in January of 1781. And so I thought that was kind of that's my goal, is to have people understand that things, you and I have hindsight. We know how the story ends. But boy, in their shoes, if you try to just imagine being in their position in December and January and February of 1781, talk about nerve-wracking and uncertain and anxiety-ridden. All right, and so poor General Gates, you know what happened to him, one of the heroes of Saratoga. I honestly think he gets a little bit of a bad rap. He played his cards very well up there at Saratoga, but of course he's condemned by many for his role in the Washington and the Conway cabal. And then of course the last worst part was what happened down at Camden, where he did not obviously perform very well. So he's going to be replaced by General Nathaniel Greene. There's our man right there. And Greene, of course, comes in early December. And one of the quotes I was planning to use, the video use. I have to minimize this for a second. Hold on, so I could read my own quotes. Okay, so you heard them say when he gets there. Notice the date, December 6th, in Charlotte, North Carolina is where he's at. You remember that General Cornwallis had planned to go into North Carolina. He had marched into North Carolina in September, and by October, you had the Kings Mountain debacle for him. So he basically changes his mind and withdraws to Winnsboro. And so now you've got Gates had moved on to Charlotte. So that's where the exchange of command took place, in Charlotte, North Carolina. And you read the quote there: wretched condition, destitute of anything necessary, starving and cold with hunger. That's what he writes on December 6th. Okay. And so by near the end of December, as you know, he decides to divide his army against all conventional wisdom of dividing your army against a superior force. And he writes to General Steuben and he says, look, we had no choice. I couldn't subsist where I was in Charlotte. There just wasn't enough forage around. And so I needed to find a place far enough away from the enemy where I could give my troops some repose. And the discipline was a big crisis for him, because they were so poorly clothed that they weren't really in the mood to listen to orders, and they weren't getting any drill. And so he's going to move the bulk of his army, which is pretty small, to I don't know how to say it properly, but it's on the east side of the PD River. And he sends Morgan with only about 300 guys. A lot of people don't realize this, that force that left, or remember they split at Charlotte. That force that Morgan had was only about 320 strong of light infantry. And it included mostly Maryland Continentals, a company of Delaware, and a company of Virginia. And I got to stress that, because we Virginians sometimes get overlooked in both cow pens with the Continentals and at Guilford. I'm working on that now. Then he writes this interesting letter, and don't worry, they're not all letters. I have images and maps too. He writes to Lafayette from the camp: you will find a few ragged, half-starved troops in the wilderness, destitute of everything. We live from hand to mouth, and we have about 800 men fit for service. Okay, and then he explains that he made a small detachment for Morgan. He makes a little joke here. He says, "I named them the Flying Army," which is another term for light infantry, And they're the flying army because they are literally so. They cannot possibly stand against General Cornwallis, especially since Cornwallis has just been reinforced with another 1,500 to 2,000 men or so. So there's Daniel Morgan in his later years and all that. So what we've got here is we've got, hopefully you can see my cursor. I can't see any of you, so I'm just going to assume you can. You've got the main army here under Greene, and you got Morgan, who's been told to come over and operate over here and try to link up with some militia and essentially be a light infantry force. He's not really got a specific mission. He actually keeps wanting to go into Georgia. And it's just interesting when you read Greene's papers, which you ought to try to do. You ought to try to get volumes 7 and 8 are spectacular. You know, Greene's getting a little impatient with Morgan keep hinting his request to go into Georgia. Greene doesn't want him to be that far away. But on top of all this, and this gets overlooked, and even the video didn't mention this, you got more bad news because in January of 1781, Benedict Arnold arrives with 1,500 troops. Ends up being 1,800 troops, and he kind of raids the James River. And he goes right up all the way to Richmond, and he burns some buildings in Richmond, and he creates all kinds of havoc going up the river and down. There's very little opposition. Virginia is real sad at this point. I mean, just pathetic what they have for forces. The militia's slow to respond. Governor Jefferson's slow to respond because he didn't get good information. And then Arnold plants himself in Portsmouth and occupies Portsmouth. So you got a British force in Portsmouth. You got reinforcements that actually Leslie had actually gone to Portsmouth in October, and then decided after he heard about Kings Mountain to go and reinforce Cornwallis. So yeah, you got a strong force of British in South Carolina, and you're General Nathaniel Greene. So look at this quote here. Just notice the highlighted ones in particular. Okay, Greene's writing to Governor Nash in January, and he says, look, they've got about 7,000 or 8,000 men when you count the reinforcements and you count the militia here. And I'm not even he's not even including Arnold yet because he doesn't know about Arnold. And remember, I told you that he had about 800 effective troops. Greene himself, and now you did have Morgan with a few hundred out there too. But this is not a fair fight. Our present force is so unequal to the enemy and in such distress for want of clothing and other supplies and forage and provision, are so scarce that we have just reason to apprehend the worst. Okay, so that's early January when he writes that. And then we get Cowpens. What a change. What an important battle Cowpens was. And I noticed you had Dr. Babbitt's in the video. Great. I mean, he's done the kind of definitive work on the Battle of Cowpens and the details and all the fighting. I'm not going to get into the battle itself, but then of course we get into the withdrawal. Now this is where we get a little bit of like what I think is not everybody, including myself early on, didn't understand what happened. I think you can justifiably say that the race of the Dan started after Cowpens, but I really don't think it was much of a race then, because what I read over and over and over again, as Morgan is withdrawing and then Greene goes and joins him, not Greene's army. General Greene actually rides to link up with Morgan near Salisbury, I believe. And no, maybe it's over here at yeah, I think it's Salisbury. But what I see is a grudging withdrawal by Morgan and Greene, hoping that militia will come and reinforce them so they can stand and fight. And each time they hope for that, it doesn't happen. There's a nasty fight, and my hat goes off to the North Carolina militia at Cowan's Ford, of course, that battle. But basically, they withdraw, and the main army, Greene's main army, is told to eventually march all the way to Guilford, and so they converge on Guilford, and that is coming up in my next slide. I thought I was cute for that. So look at this, what he writes from Sheridan's Ford on January 31st. I see the least prospect of opposing them with the little force we have, naked and distressed, our numbers greatly inferior. And then he said, this is an important thing that a lot of folks forget. The difference in the equipment and discipline of the troops give the enemy such a decided superiority that we cannot hope for anything but defeat. So that's what he writes on January 31st. The militia just aren't turning out in strong enough numbers, and his force, which is still divided on January 31st. You got Morgan's corps. And by the way, Morgan even is checking out because he's ill. And then you've got Hughie is taking up the bulk of Greene's army. And so he says, if we don't get a speedy reinforcement soon, there's nothing I can do. Okay, so this is an important moment right here. Right here. February 9th at Guilford Courthouse, he holds a war council with General. He's there with Hughie, Morgan, and Williams. Morgan is insisting I got to go. So Williams is going to be put in charge of the light infantry. Hughie's got pretty much the Continental infantry. And so this is the report he has, and he writes a letter kind of detailing this. 1,426 Continental infantry, badly armed and very much distressed by clothing. I've been doing a lot of research on Buford, Colonel Buford's remnants for the guys that got slaughtered at Waxhaws, and then some other men, other Virginians. And Greene keeps telling Jefferson they're naked. They're naked, not literally, but just about, and they can't do service. He's got about 600 badly armed militia versus what, 3,000 troops under Cornwallis, he thinks. Of course he's going to flee. And that gives us the race to the Dan, which you're all very well versed at. I typically go to 2 events in this time of year. I do the Dan in the February, and then I do Guilford Courthouse, which has been canceled. And now I guess it's a virtual one in March. And I love to try to follow that route from South. I'll go out of my way to drive that route both ways, down and then back. So it's you can do it. It's a challenge because some of the roads obviously are different. So Ann was talking about that snow, and yes, I remember that snow fondly, and they used that image in the video. But there I am, taking it all in. That was a glorious day. We were about as miserable as you could be physically, but spiritually and emotionally, we were digging it because it was a beautiful winter, big thick snowflakes and all that. And there we are crossing over the Dan in the barge that they built. Wonderful job. We started this top right picture. That was a bateau. So we started out with bateau. Note to self: tell the bateau men not to wear modern day sunglasses in the future. That you'll see they won't do. They're not doing that in other ones. And in this one, we even got the cannon. That's how good we became. The first year we used the barge got kind of dangerous because we had a rope in the water, and the water was running fast, and it was put a lot of stress on the rope, and we were very close, I think, to being washed down river. There's a picture of me in the newspaper trying to straighten out the rope. I'm lying on my belly pulling, inching. I mean, it was aggravating. I mean, not aggravating, it was exhausting. Now the next year they created this system, which is outstanding and very safe. All right, and there we are. This is in the snow again, working with that cannon, getting the cannon up. So that race to the Dan was obviously crucial. But this is where I really want to focus now. I hope you all are still with me. When he gets across the river, Greene writes a letter to Jefferson. Notice the date, February 15th. He's been across for a day, and basically he predicts that Cornwallis is going to keep chasing him. He doesn't think that it's over yet. He thinks, I think our army is an important object to him, he says, and he will oblige us to risk a general action. However, contrary to our wishes and interests, which cannot fail to prove ruinous to the army, as our force is but little more than 1/2 the enemy's, and there are few or no militia that have joined us on our march. Now, what some people don't realize, but I think the folks up in Halifax Courthouse are working hard to correct that, is that Greene withdraws across the Bannister River, and he's in Halifax Courthouse. That's another 10 miles up, all right, from South Boston and the dam. Okay. He also writes to Washington on the 15th, the miserable situation of the troops for want of clothing has rendered the march the most painful. Oh, that part about the bloody feet, hundreds of men. You can read accounts of the Trenton battle, and they say there were men with bloody feet. But we're talking, Greene tells Washington there were hundreds of them. Okay. But then notice the date here. February 17th, just 2 days later, he writes this important note to Joseph Clay, who is kind of like a commissary, quartermaster. Our armies on the north side of the Bannister River encamped at Halifax Courthouse in order to tempt the enemy to cross the Dan River. Now, I think that changed. I think at first they were there for safety, but by the 17th, Greene is singing a different tune. And you read his letters, and he's basically like, I'm finally getting the support I need. I'm getting reports of 1,000 men, riflemen under Colonel Campbell coming in. I know there's another regiment of Virginia Continentals that are making their way eventually. They don't actually start until the 25th. That's under Richard Campbell. I know of other militia from Virginia. Virginia's answering the call, okay? And then, so all of a sudden you see a little bit of a cockiness there. And then what do you know? When Cornwallis doesn't cross the Dan and actually withdraws and looks like he goes to, where am I? He goes up here to Hillsborough, Greene starts chasing him. And he does that even before those forces have arrived. I mean, Campbell's riflemen don't come anywhere near 1,000. So he's disappointed there. He does get some militia, and the Continentals eventually join him. But it's not until within a week of Guilford Courthouse itself that all those troops converge on Greene, and then he's ready for that big fight at Guilford. Okay, and so that's where I'm leading to. There were, of course, skirmishes, piles hacking happened, and Reedy Creek, I think there was a battle. So I've got a few images I plucked off of offline of us fighting at Guilford. And this, of course, does not happen without the crossing to the Dan. Guilford doesn't happen without the crossing of the Dan. And so you've got this is supposed to represent the first line. That's me with my guys. Both of these images are me. Looking over the militia. Here I am in this picture. I'm picking out Jim here. He's going to be the guy that goes back 20 paces and shoots the first deserter. That's what General Edward Stevens did at the second line. The Virginia Brigadier General. He commanded half of the Virginia troops at Guilford, and he's like, I want everybody to know there are men behind you who will shoot you if you run. And you know, the Stevens militia fought really well that day. And then the last one are this represents the third line. Okay, so the redcoats charging, and then the Maryland troops. I think the first Maryland troops counter charging and all that. We all know the battle ended in a defeat. It ended in a defeat, but it was kind of a Pyrrhic victory for Cornwallis. You know the quote. You know, another such victory, and all will be lost. So. That's all I wanted to talk about in terms of the importance. But again, you don't get to Guilford, and you all know this. You don't get to Guilford without the crossing of the Dan. And what happened, and I think the mayor, Mayor Espy, mentioned the restoration in a sense. Those days across the river, probably the night of February 16, and then February 17 and February 18. All of a sudden, everything changes because Greene is informed that help is on the way. All right. And so what we discussed yesterday at the end of my presentation is if you have any questions, because I know there's a lot more to do, feel free to type them in a chat, and I will be looking at the chat, and I can try to respond to them. But that's my presentation, and I hope you got something out of it.
Thank you, Mike. You're always give a good presentation over the years to the crossing of the Dan. Thank you for being with us today. Mike Sincere, if you have any questions, we'll stay on the Zoom meeting after our official commemoration is finished if you have questions. Now we'll hold wreath presentations. Some are going to be on site, some are going to be on Zoom. If you're on site and you have a wreath that you're presenting, please, when your name is read, come forward and honor your wreath. Those that are virtual, I will read your name and your organization. Your screen will be shown, and you can honor your wreath on screen, present your wreath on screen. I start with Daughters of the American Revolution. And Robb, Regent, Perryman Green Chapter. Kathy Sampson, Providence Chapter. Jan O'Kelly, Montpelier Chapter. From the Georgia Daughters of the American Revolution, Amy Kuhn from the Swanee Creek Chapter. Amy Croom, Swanee Creek Chapter. Next, I have representatives from the North Carolina Daughters of the American Revolution. Karen Seguin Barton of the Greenlee Chapter.
Greetings from the Greenlee chapter.
Next, Kathy Alexander from the Old North State Chapter. Terry Engel, Regent, Colonel Joseph Winston Chapter. Sharon B. Connor of the Ruth Davidson Chapter. Sharon D. Connor, the
Yes.
Ruth Davidson Chapter.
Greetings from Asheville and Ruth
Diane
David.
H. Cable, Regent, Try and Resolves Chapter. Anne Journey, Hickory Tavern Chapter. Debbie Baisley, Regent of the Guilford Battle Chapter. Harriet Riley of the Alfred Moore Chapter. Chauncey Winborn, John Penn Chapter. Shotzi Winborn, John Penn Chapter. Betty Christopher Pena of the Caswell Nash Chapter. Paige Licklider of the Battle of Alamance Chapter. Representing the Kentucky Daughters of the American Revolution, Marika Wesolowski of the Lexington Chapter. Marika Wesolowski of the Lexington Chapter. Representing the Tennessee DAR, Mary Addington, Tennessee SAR Liaison, Long Island Chapter. Cindy Timashuk of the James Madison Chapter. Cindy Timashuk of the James Madison Chapter. From the Ohio Daughters of the American Revolution, Janet Gumry of the Elizabeth Sherman Reese Chapter. From the Children of the American Revolution, Stacy Wojciechowski, President and Vice President, and also Sarah Cox, President and Vice President of the Virginia Society, Children of the American Revolution. Ellie Wingate, President of the Eagles of Liberty Society. Ellie Wingate, President, Eagles of Liberty Society. Anna Cox, President of the Colonel Alexander Spotswood Society. Now we'll go to the wreaths from the Sons of the American Revolution. First, Jeff Thomas, President, Virginia Society, Sons of the American Revolution. Thomas Van Fossen, District Vice President of the Texas Society, Sons of the American Revolution. Frederick D. Leonard, President of the North Carolina Society, SAR. Kenneth Scott Collins, past President of the Georgia Society, Sons of the American Revolution. Steve Mallory, President-elect of the Kentucky Society Sons of the American Revolution. Steve Mallory, past President-elect, Kentucky Society. David Carr, past President of the Tennessee Society. Now, wreath presenters from Virginia SAR. First, the Dan River Society. Thomas Van Fossen, District Vice President, Texas Society. Thomas Van Fossen, District Vice President, Texas Society. Frederick D. Leonard, President of the North Carolina Society. Frederick D. Leonard, President, North Carolina Society. Kenneth Scott Collins, past President of the Georgia Society. Steve Mallory, President-elect, Kentucky Society. Steve Mallory, President-elect, Kentucky Society. David Carr, past President, Tennessee Society. Okay, for the Virginia SAR, I've duplicated some of those. Sorry about that. Next, we've got Andrew S. Doss, Chapter President, Colonel George Weiler, Chapter. Thank you. Chris Yon, Richmond, Chapter. David E. Cook, Fairfax Resolve, Chapter. Gary P. Pridgeon, Norfolk, Chapter. Gary. Thank you. Roger Cross, Williamsburg, Chapter. Charles Jameson, Culpeper, Minutemen, Chapter. Ross H. Swam, Chapter President, Colonel David Grayson, Chapter. Mark Day, Thomas Jefferson, Chapter. Thomas M. Roth III, Chapter President, and Vassar Historian, George Washington, Chapter. Dennis Permiter, Colonel James Wood, Chapter. Dennis Parmiter, Colonel James Wood, Chapter. Donald Campbell, Martin's Station, Chapter. Donald Campbell, Martin's Station, Chapter. John Hamilton, Colonel Felding, Lewis, Chapter. Kenneth Morris, George Mason, Chapter. Gary Hodges, Thomas Nielsen, Jr., Chapter. From the North Carolina Sons of the American Revolution, Robert Webster, President, Newbern, Chapter. Jack Bowman, State Secretary, Catawba Valley, Chapter. Franklin Merrill, Salisbury, Chapter. Larry Chapman, Blue Ridge, Chapter. Thomas Davis, Raleigh chapter. Bill Riggin, Halifax Resolve chapter. Bill Reagan, Halifax Resolve chapter. Robert Patton, President of the Colonel Alexander Irwin chapter. John J. Sullivan, Nathaniel Green chapter. George Strunk, General George Washington chapter. Larry Brown, Alamance Battleground chapter. Larry Brown, Alamance Battleground chapter. Bruce Finsley, Sandhills chapter. David Alls, Old North State chapter. Robert Mullen, Le Marquis de Lafayette chapter. Representing the Kentucky Sons of the American Revolution, John Doss, Governor Isaac Shelby chapter. Steve Gaffer, Lafayette chapter. Douglas Collins, Register General, Louisville, Thurston chapter. Jackie Miller, Kentucky Society Historian and President of the Blue Licks chapter. From the Tennessee Sons of the American Revolution, Harlan Dabney, Stones River chapter. James J. Jefferson, King Mountain chapter. Representing the Ohio Sons of the American Revolution, Gary Duffield, Highlanders chapter. Robert Bowers, Cincinnati chapter. Reverend Matthew W. Hartman, chapter president, and Ohio SAR chaplain, Hocking Valley chapter. Donald George Miller, president, Franklin chapter. Representing the Michigan Sons of the American Revolution, Paul Gallahan, past state president, Northern Michigan chapter. From the Texas Sons of the American Revolution, Gary Baker, Edmund Terrell chapter. Bob Johns, Plano chapter. Other organizations on site, we have Barbara Bass, president of the Halifax County Historical Society. Pat Kelly, the French Society. Ginger Gentry, the Jamestown Society. Dr. Michael E. Weiler, Governor, Virginia Society, the Order of the Founders and Patriots of Americas. And Janet Johnson, who is representing the historic Staunton River Foundation. Janet Johnson. That was a lot of participation. We appreciate everyone honoring our ancestors. We now would like to recognize the color guards participants that are not on site. Kenneth Bonner, Color Guard Commander of the Virginia Society, will now present the names of the SAR Color Guard participants.
We will now read the color guard muster, beginning with, I'd like to recognize representing the National Society, Vice Color Guard Commander Brooks Lyle. Pleased to say he was able to join us here today. From the Virginia Society, Jeff Thomas, Fairfax Resolves. Gary Hall, Dan River Chapter. Pat Kelly, Thomas Jefferson. John Thomas, Fairfax Resolves. Mike Geisinger, Dan River. Dale Corey, Colonel James Wood II. David Cook, Fairfax Resolves. Fred Osborne, Colonel James Wood II. Charles Jameson, Culpeper Minutemen. Alan Phillips, Colonel James Wood II. Bill Schwetke, Culpeper Minutemen. Seth Roderick, Colonel Fielding Lewis. Richard Potter, Colonel William Grayson. John Calloway, Colonel William Grayson. Jared Marlowe, Colonel George Waller. Winford Folks, George Waller. Chip Daniel, Colonel James Wood II. James O'Kelly, Thomas Jefferson. Blake Branch, Thomas Jefferson. Ken Morris, George Mason. Representing the New Jersey Society, Kenneth Harrington McKeever, Princeton Cranberry. Representing the Georgia Society, Scott Collins, Athens Chapter. Representing North Carolina Society, Frederick Leonard, Beth Barra of Winston-Salem Chapter. Bob Ainsley, New Bern. Ronald Clark Bonham, General George Washington. John J. Sullivan, Nathaniel Green. George Strunk, General George Washington. Larry Brown, Alamance Battleground. Steve and Julia Green, Blue Ridge Chapter. Ralph Nelson, General Francis Nash. Roderick Mullen, Marquis de Lafayette. Rand Matthews, Raleigh Chapter. Holden Spain, General George Washington. Steve Green, Blue Ridge Chapter. David Owls, Old North State Chapter. Representing the Kentucky Society, John Doss, Governor Isaac Shelby. Steve Gehafer, Lafayette Chapter. Scott Giltner, Governor Isaac Shelby. Patrick Wesolowski, Governor Isaac Shelby. Representing the Tennessee Society, Darrell Addington, Kings Mountain Chapter. David Carr, Kings Mountain Chapter. Walter Timoschuk, Stone River Chapter. Harlan Dabney, Stone River. Douglas Dickerson, Stones River. Steve Green, Blue Ridge Chapter. Representing the Ohio Society, Bob Hill, Corps Guard Commander, Ohio Society. Gary Duffield, Highlanders Chapter number 43. Clayton Lowell Crandall, Cincinnati. Thomas Hankins, Hocking Valley. Jeffrey Walt, Hocking Valley. Reverend Matthew Hardman, Hocking Valley. Gumray, Alan Gumray, Hocking Valley. Robert Davis, Hocking Valley. Elwin Spray, Richard Montgomery Chapter. Representing the Alabama Society, Michael Martin, Cahaba Coosa Chapter. Representing the Michigan Society, Paul Callanan, Northern Michigan Chapter. Representing the Texas Society, Blair Rudy, Color Guard Commander for the Texas Society. William Watts, Dallas Chapter. John Greer, Edmond Terrell Chapter. Bob Johns, Plano Chapter. Robert Anthony Kittrell, Dallas Chapter number 2. Gary Barker, Edmond Terrell Chapter. Shedon Holy, Patrick Henry number 11 Chapter. And Thomas Van Fossen, Dallas Chapter. Huzzah, Color Guard.
Today, the colors will be retired in place. I have a few closing comments. There's so many people that's involved in a production and a commemoration as this. I would like to thank David Haynes and Emmett Abernathy, who built the ferry that we have used in past crossings of the dam. For those that are coming to the museum, that ferry has been risen from the pond and is out in the parking lot. So if you'd like to come by and talk with David Haney or Emmett Abernathy, they will be in the parking lot. Also would like to thank several organizations that were very big in this commemoration. The Berryman Green Chapter, DAR, Halifax County Historical Society, Halifax County, Virginia, the town of South Boston, the town of Halifax, the Dan River Chapter of the Sons of the American Revolution. I also would like to thank my co-committee members for the crossing of the Dan. It's a lot of work coming in. Mike Geisinger in particular has led us as our chairman and makes this possible every year. Special thanks goes to the South Boston Halifax County Museum. They've allowed us to use their facility to hold this commemoration. I appreciate that. If you would like to have questions answered by Mike Cecere, he will remain online, but this is the close of the ceremony, 2040th crossing of the dam.